The clink of silverware and laughter from other tables filled the elegant restaurant. But at the center of table 14 sat a woman in a navy dress, alone, her trembling fingers wrapped around a wine glass she didn't want. Eleanor Parker had prepared for this night like it was a second wedding, maybe her last chance to feel loved again. But love had abandoned her. Her heart thudded against ribs too weary to break again, yet somehow still bleeding. At 68, she had faced grief before, but nothing quite like this, being forgotten by the people she brought into this world. The sting of that empty chair next to her was deeper than death. She had spent the past 3 days transforming herself into someone worthy of her family's attention, maybe even their affection. Every tiny detail had been rehearsed. The outfit, the table setting, the restaurant choice. She hadn't just picked any place. She chose Damore & Sons, the most exclusive restaurant in town, the kind with soft jazz playing through candlelight and menus without prices. The reservation for 6 had cost her $950. Her hands had shaken as she'd entered her credit card details online, not from fear of spending the money, but from hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd all show up this time. It was her first Christmas without Robert. 6 months had passed since her husband of 44 years took his last breath in their quiet bedroom, holding her hand. The world hadn't stopped spinning, but hers had. She had tried to keep moving, cooking smaller meals, talking to neighbors, pretending like living alone didn't echo so loudly in the silence. But holidays were different. They weren't just days, they were tests. And this one, she thought, could be her chance to gather the remnants of her family into something whole again, or at least something that looked like it. She had called each of her 3 children weeks in advance. Just dinner, she had said. No gifts, no pressure. Just sit with me. And each had promised with those cheerful, half-distracted tones that sound warm but carry the cold of obligation. That afternoon, as she laid out the pearls Robert gave her on their 40th anniversary, her phone rang. It was her eldest, Lena, always the sweet-talking one. "Mom, I'm so sorry," she crooned. "Maddie woke up sick. We can't bring her out in this weather. You understand, right?" Eleanor's voice didn't crack, not yet. "Of course, honey. Is she running a fever?" "Just a little. Probably nothing, but better safe than sorry. Let's reschedule." Reschedule. As if Christmas dinners came with a calendar of backups. An hour later, Tom, her middle child, called. His tone was clipped, urgent. "Hey, Mom. There's a situation at the office. Big client. Can't get away." She clutched her phone tighter. "What about Marina and the boys?" "They're helping Lena with Maddie. Trying to keep the kids busy." There was silence. Eleanor blinked twice, trying to stay present. "So they're all together?" "Just helping out," he said quickly. "It's not like we planned a thing." And finally, as if her heart hadn't cracked enough, Ben, her youngest, called with the most dramatic tale of all. "My car broke down. Battery's dead. I called AAA, but they're swamped tonight. Might be hours." "Could you get a cab?" she asked. Her voice was too soft to sound accusing. "Nah, not with the roads like this," he said. "Next year, okay? I promise." Eleanor stood in her living room long after that last call ended. Her navy dress fit just like it had a decade ago, but it suddenly felt heavier. Maybe it was the loneliness stitched into the seams. She looked at the clock. 6:07 p.m. The reservation was for 6:30. The table was waiting. So was she. She drove anyway. The restaurant welcomed her with warmth she didn't feel. The hostess, a young woman with kind eyes, glanced at the reservation screen, then at Eleanor, her smile faltering. "A table for 6?" "Yes," Eleanor answered, "but it's just me tonight. Would you like to move to a smaller table?" "No," her voice was firmer than she expected. "Leave it." She sat there, watching families laugh and toast each other. Grandparents surrounded by grandchildren. Parents passing bread. Everyone had someone. Eleanor had silverware, an empty chair, and a heart sinking deeper by the minute. She ordered a bottle of Bordeaux, Robert's favorite, and appetizers for 6. Maybe she thought if she filled the table with food, it wouldn't feel so achingly empty. But it did. And as she watched an older couple at the next table kiss their granddaughter on the cheek, Eleanor's tears began to fall. Not loudly, not messily, just silently and steadily, like a faucet someone forgot to turn off. That's when she heard the doors burst open. Fast footsteps followed. "Grandma!" a voice called out, and every head turned toward the entrance. She looked up. It was Caleb, her 17-year-old grandson. His face was flushed, his coat only half buttoned, and in his hand was a large manila envelope. He was out of breath, and his eyes were glassy with unshed tears. "I had to find you," he said, rushing toward her, ignoring the murmurs and curious stares. She stood, confused, wiping her eyes. "What are you doing here? Aren't you with your mom?" "They're all together," he said, placing the envelope on the table. "At Giovanni's, just 3 blocks away. They planned this, Grandma. For weeks. This dinner, this wasn't an accident. They needed you out of the way." The noise of the restaurant fell away. Her fingers trembled as she stared at the envelope. "What are you talking about?" Caleb's jaw clenched. "It's from Grandpa's lawyer. It came today. His will, Grandma. And something else." He slid the envelope closer. "They didn't want you to see it, but you need to." She looked at the boy, her grandson, or at least she thought he was. His face looked too old for 17, like he'd been carrying this burden for years. Her voice barely whispered, "What's inside?" He leaned forward. The truth. Everything. Eleanor sat back down slowly, her eyes never leaving the envelope in front of her. Her fingers, once so steady when she poured tea for sick kids or tied shoelaces before school, now trembled. Caleb's voice was still too loud in her head. "They planned this, Grandma." What did that even mean? What kind of family planned around removing their own mother from a dinner table? She stared at the thick manila envelope, afraid to open it, afraid not to. Her grandson, was he even her grandson anymore, was sitting beside her, breathing heavily, the color returning to his cheeks as the winter air faded off his skin. The restaurant noise buzzed around them, but none of it reached her ears. "Open it," he said gently. "I'll explain everything." She slipped her thumb under the seal and peeled it open slowly, like unraveling a bandage she knew would reveal a wound. Inside were 2 things, a stack of legal documents and a set of printed DNA results. "This," she whispered, holding the papers like they might shatter. "It's Grandpa's will," Caleb said, "and a DNA test. He ordered it months before he passed." Why would he? She didn't finish the question. Part of her already knew. "Because they were lying to you," Caleb said. "About everything. About me." Her breath caught. "You're not my—" He nodded. "Not biologically. My adoption wasn't what Mom told you it was. She said I was the son of your cousin's daughter, right? That I lost my parents in a car crash." She nodded slowly. "That was a lie. The lawyer, Grandpa's lawyer, he brought a private investigator into it. I was born to a teenage girl who couldn't keep me. Your daughter adopted me privately, off the books. But why?" Eleanor asked, her voice thin. "Money," he said, almost ashamed to speak the word. "They used me, Grandma, to get more out of you and Grandpa. Made it seem like I was your blood, so you'd keep helping." The words punched the air out of her lungs. She stared at the table, suddenly understanding every suspicious moment that had passed over the years. All the times her daughter asked for money for Caleb's school fees or sports equipment. The way she insisted he spend holidays with them, even when Eleanor begged for time. It had all been part of a carefully controlled lie. "But Caleb, you came here. Why?" He looked at her, eyes wide with something deeper than sadness. "Because even if I'm not blood, you're still my family. You always have been." She let the words settle for a moment before responding, her voice stronger than she expected. Tell me everything. Start from the beginning. He did. Right there, in the middle of the restaurant, between a barely touched plate of roasted duck and the wine Robert used to love, Caleb told her everything. About the reading of the will. About how her children had been sitting in a high-rise office with Harold's lawyer, smug and expectant, waiting to hear how their inheritance would change their lives. And then Mr. Bowen, Grandpa's lawyer, started reading the real contents, Caleb said. The house, the investments, the retirement funds. All of it, he left it to you. Eleanor blinked. Just me. He nodded. All of it, except for one clause. If anything happens to you, the estate passes directly to the grandchildren, not your kids. He bypassed them completely. She almost laughed. It sounded so much like Robert. Always quietly protective, always thinking ahead. Even in death, he was watching her back. But they told me, she shook her head, they told me he left everything to them. That was their plan. They thought if you didn't show up to the will reading, they could delay things, find ways to take control. And then the DNA results came out. She looked back at the page. It was clinical, cold. A list of comparisons between genetic markers. The conclusion at the bottom was stark. No biological relation detected between the subject and primary family line. It was like someone lit a match in the room, Caleb said. Your daughter, my adoptive mother, she freaked out. Screaming, crying. Uncle Tom started yelling at the lawyer. Uncle Ben just sat there like the world was ending. And you? I sat there remembering every birthday card you gave me, every time you hugged me, every meal you made me feel like a real part of this family. And I knew I had to tell you the truth. Eleanor looked down at her hands. They were still shaking. You didn't have to, she said. I did, Caleb replied. Because they're not done, Grandma. They're already making plans. They're meeting with a lawyer tomorrow morning. They're going to try to declare you mentally unfit. She froze. What? They're going to say you can't handle your money, that you're slipping, that you need guardianship. She blinked. They think they can just take control of my life? That's the plan. But there's more. They want to use me. Say that I fraudulently obtained gifts over the years. That I helped manipulate you. That's disgusting, Eleanor whispered. I know. That's why I came here. I couldn't let them twist the truth again. For a long time, she didn't speak. She just looked at the boy in front of her. Not her grandson by blood, but by heart, by love. There was no doubt. You're staying with me tonight, she said. We'll figure this out in the morning. He nodded. I already packed a bag. She smiled, even as tears slipped down her cheeks. Good. I could use someone on my side. For the first time that evening, Eleanor felt something stir inside her chest, not pain, not grief. Something sharper. Resolve. They didn't talk much on the way home. The envelope lay flat between them in the back seat of the cab, like it carried something radioactive. Caleb sat with his hands folded in his lap, eyes darting toward Eleanor now and then, as if checking whether she still wanted him there. She didn't speak, not out of anger, but because words felt too small. What did you say when everything you believed about your family collapsed in one night? The city blurred past the window as Eleanor thought about Robert. How quiet he had become those last few months. She used to think it was the pain from his illness. Now she wondered if it was heartbreak, watching the children they raised become strangers in pursuit of what was his, of what was meant to be hers. When they reached her apartment, Caleb helped her out of the cab without a word. She noticed how he took the envelope like it was his responsibility, like he knew what it meant. That touched her more than anything else that night. Inside, the apartment was still warm from the radiator, but it felt different. Not lonely, not tonight. She went straight to the kitchen and started boiling water for tea, while Caleb sat at the table, looking smaller under the bright ceiling light. He looked up only when she set a mug in front of him. How long have you known? She asked, finally. His shoulders sagged. Not long. I started to suspect years ago. Mom's stories never lined up. One time she told me I was related to you through her cousin. Another time she said it was a family friend. I got curious. Looked through her papers when she wasn't home. There was nothing. No birth certificate. No legal adoption. Just lies. Eleanor stirred sugar into her tea with deliberate calm. Why didn't you ask me? I thought maybe I didn't want to know, he said. And I was scared. What if you stopped caring about me? I never would have, she said instantly. I know that now, but it took tonight for me to believe it. He looked down, then added softly, they coached me, you know, on how to act around you, what to say, how to make you feel needed. Her stomach turned. Mom would tell me to mention how expensive my school shoes were, or that I wanted to join a summer program, but couldn't afford it. She always made sure I looked just sad enough to tug at your heart. Eleanor looked away, pressing her fingertips to her temple. All those times I thought I was being a good grandmother, she whispered. I was being played. No, Caleb said. You were loving. You were doing what good people do. They just took advantage of that. She turned back to him. Did any of it ever feel real to you? All of it, he said. At least when I was with you and Grandpa. The feelings were real, even if the setup wasn't. That's why I'm here. Because no matter what they say, you were the one who actually cared. They sat in silence for a while. Eleanor sipped her tea, eyes unfocused, as Caleb scrolled through something on his phone. They're meeting with a new lawyer tomorrow morning, he said. I overheard them before I left. They'll try to have me declared incompetent, she said bitterly. Yes. They were talking about doctors who would say you're showing signs of memory loss. Uncle Tom said they could get guardianship over your finances by the end of the month if they play it right. They want me out of the way. He nodded. Eleanor set down her mug more firmly than she intended. Then let's not make it so easy for them. Caleb looked at her, surprised. She stood up, moving toward the hall closet. Inside, behind an old umbrella and Robert's walking cane, was a small black notebook. She flipped through its worn pages, stopping at a name and number near the back. Robert's lawyer, she said. We're going to see him in the morning. Caleb stood, more hope in his eyes than she'd seen all night. Really? I've spent too many years letting people think I'm soft just because I'm kind, she said. It ends now. She didn't sleep much that night, but it wasn't the usual tossing and turning of regret. It was planning, remembering, noticing. She reviewed conversations in her head that had once felt warm but now sounded like manipulation. She thought about the holidays her children had skipped, the emergencies that always seemed to cost thousands, the visits that only came after a wire transfer. By morning, she felt sharper than she had in years. Not angry, focused. Caleb was already up when she came out of her bedroom. He had folded the blanket he'd used on the couch and was sitting at the table again, fully dressed. Sleep okay? She asked. He nodded. Better than I have in months. Good. We've got things to do. They took a cab to Mr. Bowen's office downtown. It was an older building with worn carpets and the smell of old paper. Bowen himself greeted them with a firm handshake and a sympathetic smile. Mrs. Parker, he said. Robert left specific instructions in case something like this happened. I have more documents for you. He handed her another envelope, this one even thicker. Inside were photographs, financial reports, printed emails, and transcripts. He started getting suspicious about a year before his passing, Bowen explained. He asked us to dig quietly, to build protections around you. Eleanor pulled out a photo. It was Lena stepping out of a luxury spa, date-stamped 3 days after she called Eleanor crying about school costs. She told me she was doing double shifts, Eleanor whispered. She wasn't, Bowen said. Neither was Tom when he claimed his company was struggling, or Ben when he begged for help with overdue rent. It's all here. She turned to the next page. It was a bank statement, a transfer from her joint account with Robert, $4,000, followed by a deposit into a boutique travel agency. They were never in trouble, she said slowly. Just greedy. Bowen nodded solemnly. There's more, he said. Robert had a clause added to the will. Anyone who tries to contest it or declare you unfit immediately forfeits their inheritance, and their share reverts directly to you. Eleanor sat back, stunned. So they try to take it from me. They lose everything. Yes, that was Robert's final protection. But he left one more thing. He reached into his desk and pulled out a sealed envelope. For you, to be opened after you've seen all the evidence. She took it in shaking hands. On the front, in Robert's handwriting, were the words, "For Eleanor, when you're ready to fight." Eleanor traced the letters of her name on the envelope with the tip of her finger, as if somehow feeling his handwriting would bring Robert closer. The quiet hush of the lawyer's office made her heartbeat sound louder in her ears. Caleb sat silently beside her, respectfully waiting, not pushing. She could feel his eyes flicking toward her hands as she carefully broke the seal. The first page was thick, cream-colored stationery, the kind Robert always used for serious things. His handwriting was still the same, sharp, precise, full of the same quiet strength he carried when he was alive. "My dearest Eleanor," it began. She had to pause right there. The words blurred before her eyes. Her breath caught in her throat. Caleb gently reached across the desk and placed his hand over hers. She didn't look up, but her fingers turned, wrapping around his without a word. She kept reading. "If you're reading this, it means you've finally seen what I saw long ago. I'm sorry, Elle. I'm sorry it had to come to this. I wanted to believe the best of them, our children. I wanted to believe they'd grow into people who valued more than money. But I watched and I listened, and my heart broke as I saw how they changed, how they treated you. You never stopped forgiving, never stopped hoping, and I admired that. But I also knew someone had to protect you if they didn't." Her lips quivered as she read on, her tears hitting the paper in soft, warm dots. "You spent decades giving them everything, your time, your money, your love. They learned to take, but they never learned to give it back. That was not your failure. That was theirs." She looked up finally, eyes rimmed with red. Caleb sat still, watching her with so much empathy it nearly undid her again. "I didn't even see it," she whispered. "I thought maybe I was being too sensitive all these years. When they canceled plans, when they forgot birthdays, when they called only when they needed something. I told myself, that's just how grown children are." Caleb shook his head. "They knew exactly what they were doing. You just loved them too much to question it." She smiled, but it was a tired smile. "That's what Robert saw. He knew I wouldn't protect myself." "He did more than that," Bowen said gently. "He built an entire system around you." He opened another drawer and pulled out a second folder. "After his cancer diagnosis, he came to us. He said, 'I don't have much time left, but I need to make sure she has the rest of hers.'" Eleanor's throat tightened again. "He set up a trust. If your children tried to declare you mentally unfit, the entire estate would automatically go under the management of an independent trustee. They wouldn't see a penny. And the will includes language that forces any contestant to forfeit their share. He made it airtight, Mrs. Parker." She looked down at Robert's letter again. It wasn't just legal protection, it was love. Love turned into structure. Love written in ink and sealed in envelopes. Love that kept working even after his body gave up. She turned to Caleb. "You shouldn't have had to carry this." He shook his head. "I'd carry it again, 100 times." A silence passed between them. Not awkward, not empty, just full. Then she spoke again. "What happens now?" Bowen leaned forward. "You have the legal advantage. The question is, do you want to fight back publicly or keep things quiet? We can file paperwork that bars them from further challenges. Freeze any claims they're trying to build. but it will burn bridges. Eleanor smiled faintly. Bridges? Those burned a long time ago. Caleb reached into the envelope and pulled out a small printout. There's more. Grandpa left money in a separate account for me. Bowen nodded. He didn't care about DNA. He told me that boy's the only one who ever showed up. That mattered more than blood ever did. Eleanor let out a soft, broken laugh. That sounds like him. Do you want to go to the house today? Caleb asked. He left the keys. Mr. Bowen said there's something there for you. Eleanor looked at the envelope again, the letter still in her hand. I think I do. I think I'm finally ready to see what else he tried to show me. They left the office quietly. Bowen shook Eleanor's hand with both of his, and Caleb carefully tucked the documents back into the envelope like they were made of glass. The car ride to the lake house was mostly silent. The sky was overcast, the kind of gray that whispered of snow, though the roads were still clear. Eleanor stared out the window, watching trees blur past, landmarks she half remembered from years of summer trips. Every turn brought back a piece of memory. Robert fixing the porch railing. Caleb, years younger, jumping into the lake with reckless joy. The sound of old records spinning in the sunroom while she and Robert danced in socks on the wooden floor. As they turned onto the graveled driveway, she caught her breath. The house stood exactly as they'd left it. Same blue shutters, same wooden porch swing, same slanted mailbox that Robert swore he'd fix every year and never did. She sat quietly for a moment before stepping out. Caleb unlocked the door with the new key. Inside, it smelled like lavender and lemonwood polish. Her eyes swept the living room, then the kitchen, each corner echoing memories. She walked slowly, hand brushing over the back of Robert's reading chair, the edge of the kitchen counter, the picture frames that still held old family photos. But it was in the study that she found it, a single envelope on the desk, her name written again in his handwriting. Below that, one line, "For the woman I married, for the life you still deserve." She didn't open it yet. Instead, she sat in his old chair, feeling the indentations in the cushion, the creak in the armrest, the memories in the air. Caleb stood at the doorway, quiet. "You want me to leave you alone?" he asked softly. She shook her head. "No. Stay." He sat across from her, legs pulled up in the worn armchair Robert always claimed was too soft to think in. Eleanor smiled. "I think this is the part where everything starts to change," she said. And when she opened that letter, she knew she was right. Eleanor unfolded the second letter with both hands, careful like she was opening a piece of her past. The paper crackled slightly, and Robert's scent seemed to rise from it, the faint smell of cedarwood and ink that used to linger on his clothes. His handwriting curved neatly across the page, and as her eyes moved over the words, the breath caught in her throat. "If you're here, sitting in my study, it means you've decided to see what I left behind. That makes me proud of you already. Because I know you. You hesitate. You doubt yourself. You wait too long to put your own needs first. So if you're here, you've taken your first step back toward yourself, toward the strong woman I've always known you are." Eleanor had to stop reading. Her voice cracked just trying to breathe. She folded the page on her lap and stared out the window. "I don't feel strong," she said. Caleb looked over. "You don't have to feel it to be it." She gave him a sideways glance, surprised by how grown he suddenly sounded. "You always talk like someone older." He shrugged. "I had to grow up a little faster than most kids." She looked down again at Robert's letter and nodded slowly. "So did I. I didn't realize it until now." Her eyes scanned the next paragraph. "They'll come back, Elle. Once they realize they can't bend the rules, they'll try bending you instead. With tears, with promises, with stories about family and healing. But you don't owe them anything anymore. You gave them your life. Give yourself what's left." Tears fell again. They came softer now, not explosive grief, more like a steady rain that had waited too long to fall. I always thought being a good mother meant forgiving everything, she whispered. Caleb's voice was quiet. Sometimes it does, but not forever. The letter continued. I bought the land next door. I never told you. I was going to build us a guest cottage for our 50th anniversary. Something small and quiet. You always said you wanted your own space to read, to bake, to just be. If you want it now, it's yours. The deed and the funds are in the safe behind my diploma. You know the code, your birthday. Eleanor gave a shaky little laugh. He was always trying to surprise me. I never guessed. Not once. Caleb smiled faintly. I think he knew how much it would mean to you now. Yeah, she said softly. He always did. They moved together to the safe, hidden behind a framed degree on the wall. Eleanor reached up and took it down, fingers still trembling, just enough to make Caleb step in. Let me, he asked gently. She stepped back and let him spin the dial. The lock clicked open on the third try. Inside were neatly labeled folders, an envelope marked for the bank, a small black box, and one thick legal envelope with a printed deed. Eleanor picked up the box first. Inside was a tiny gold key. He wanted me to build something that was mine, she said. Something just mine. You still can, Caleb said. They stood in the room for a few quiet minutes. Neither said much. They didn't need to. There was a kind of language that passed between people who'd shared heartbreak together. It didn't always need words. That evening, they walked the edge of the lot next door. It was just trees now, bare from winter, the ground still cold and cracked. But Eleanor could already see it. A tiny house, a garden, a porch just big enough for 2 chairs, and a table where she could set her teacup while watching the lake. Caleb stopped mid-step. Do you remember when we used to build pillow forts in the living room? She laughed. Robert used to pretend he was annoyed, but he always brought us snacks inside. Yeah, he used to call it the Fortress of Crumbs. She smiled wide for the first time in days. God, I'd forgotten that. They walked a little more. You ever think about what you want to do next? She asked. Caleb paused. Sometimes. I like drawing. I used to hide it, though. Mom said it was a waste of time. Eleanor turned to him. Then you should draw, and not just as a hobby. You should really go after it. You think so? She nodded. Robert did too. He left something for your education. It's not because of blood or names or expectations. It's because he believed in you. Caleb looked stunned for a second. He believed in me. More than anyone, she said. And so do I. They walked back to the house, both quieter now. Eleanor felt tired in a good way, like the weight on her chest had finally shifted into something she could carry, like she wasn't being crushed by it anymore. That night, while Caleb sketched at the kitchen table, Eleanor sat in Robert's chair and read his letter again. Then she placed it in her nightstand drawer, right beside a photo of them from the early years, when the kids were still babies and everything seemed possible. She watched Caleb for a moment, his head bent in concentration, the tip of his pencil moving fast across the page. You look happy, she said. I think I am, he answered without looking up. And in that moment, for the first time in what felt like forever, so was she. The next morning, the sunlight came in softer than usual. Eleanor stood by the window in her robe, her hand gently resting against the cool glass. The lake shimmered just beyond the trees. For a long time, she simply watched the wind push ripples across the water, like invisible hands trying to smooth out the creases in her life. Behind her, Caleb shuffled into the kitchen, still half asleep, rubbing his eyes. Is it morning already? He mumbled. She smiled without turning. Technically, but no rush. We're not racing anyone anymore. He sat down at the table, yawning. Coffee. I've got it, she said, already moving to fill the kettle. As she waited for the water to boil, her fingers tapped the counter. She couldn't stop thinking about what Caleb had overheard before he left Lena's house. The lawyer meeting, the guardianship talk, the way they had planned to use her own love against her. They're probably still going through with it, she said aloud. Caleb looked up, blinking away sleep. You want to stop them? I want them to know they can't do this to me anymore. I've spent too many years walking on eggshells around my own children. You sure you're ready? He asked. She met his eyes. I'm sure I'm tired of being the one who gets left behind. They made the calls that afternoon, one by one. The first was to Lena. The line rang longer than it used to. Maybe she didn't recognize the number. Or maybe she hesitated, knowing what Eleanor now knew. When she finally picked up, her voice was syrupy sweet. Mom? Oh, thank God. Are you okay? We were so worried. Eleanor held the phone tightly. You were never worried. Don't insult me. Silence. I know about the meeting, the guardianship, the fake concern. I know everything, Lena. The shift in her daughter's voice was immediate. Okay, let's just calm down. No, not this time, Eleanor cut in. You've had 30 years to calm me down, to talk over me, to make me feel like I was the one losing touch. I'm done. You're being dramatic. No, I'm being clear. You lied about Caleb. You coached him to manipulate me. You stole money. You tried to take away my freedom. And you did it all behind smiles, and I love yous. That's worse than stealing. It's betrayal. Mom, I didn't mean for it to go this far. But you let it, Eleanor said. And now there are consequences. What about Caleb? You can't just take my son. You abandoned that right when you made him a pawn, Eleanor said firmly. He's staying here, and he's not going back to a house where love comes with strings attached. There was a pause, then tears, the kind that used to break Eleanor's heart. Not anymore. Goodbye, Lena, she said softly. I hope you find whatever it is you were always chasing. But it's not going to be for me anymore. She hung up. Caleb stood nearby, silent, his arms folded like he didn't know whether to cheer or cry. Was it hard? He asked. No, she said. It should have been. But it wasn't. Next came Tom. He answered with anger already in his voice. What the hell, Mom? You disappear from dinner, and now you're cutting us off? You've been talking to that kid, haven't you? Caleb, she corrected. His name is Caleb, and he's more honest than you've ever been. Tom scoffed. Oh, give me a break. He's been feeding you lies to make you turn against us. No, Tom. He told me the truth. The same truth your father saw before he died. The truth you all tried to bury under fake emergencies and rehearsed sympathy. You're seriously going to throw away your whole family for some adopted kid? Eleanor's voice didn't waver. You already threw it away. I'm just accepting it now. You're going to regret this, he snapped. No, Tom, she said calmly. I regret every time I trusted you after the lies. I regret giving you my heart when all you wanted was my money. She ended the call without another word. Then came Ben. He answered with a heavy sigh, like a man already defeated. Look, Mom, I know what you're going to say. I'm sorry, okay? No, Ben, she said gently. You're not, and that's fine. I'm not looking for sorry. I just want you to understand I'm done being the weak link. He sounded tired, like maybe, for once, he was listening. We messed up, he said, but we're still your kids. You were, she said, but somewhere along the line, you stopped being my children and started being strangers who smiled when my wallet opened. There was no fight left in his voice. So that's it. That's it, she said, but not out of anger. I'm choosing peace, and for the first time in my life, I think I deserve it. She ended the call and leaned back in her chair. Caleb was already beside her, wrapping his arms around her shoulders in a quiet hug that said everything his words couldn't. Are you okay? He asked. I'm not sure yet, she said, but I know I'm free. That evening, they sat on the back porch, the stars blinking into the dark sky, the lake still and silver like it was holding its breath. I was thinking, Caleb said after a while, if I go to art school nearby, I could still live here. Maybe use the guest cottage once it's built. Eleanor smiled, a real one this time. I'd like that. And maybe one day, when you're ready, you could let people come visit. Real friends. Good people. Like who? He laughed. I don't know. Maybe the neighbors. Or that bookshop lady who always gives you extra bookmarks. Eleanor laughed too, the sound surprising her. Maybe. One day. Caleb reached over and held her hand. You did good today. So did you. They sat together long after the night had gone quiet. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. It was the first time in years Eleanor hadn't felt alone in her own home. And it was the first time she truly understood. Love isn't something you buy. It's something you fight for. And sometimes it's something you find when you finally stop looking in the wrong places. 6 weeks passed. The days moved slower in the countryside. Eleanor found herself waking up early, not out of habit, but peace. She no longer rushed for anyone. There were no panicked texts from Lena needing emergency childcare, no awkward Sunday brunches where her children checked their phones more than they looked at her, no false apologies wrapped in birthday calls that came a day late. There was just morning light filtering through linen curtains, a warm mug in her hands, and the quiet sound of Caleb sketching by the kitchen window. He had settled in like he belonged there all along. And maybe Eleanor thought he always had. The guest cottage was nearly halfway built. They had picked the design together. Caleb's artistic eye had turned her vague dreams into blueprints. It was a modest little home, 1 bedroom, a studio space, and a porch just big enough for watching the lake with tea in hand. I still can't believe he left all this for you, Caleb said one evening as they looked out at the lot. Not for me, she corrected gently. For us. He saw you, Caleb. The way he talked about you. I didn't realize it then, but now I understand. He always knew who you really were. Caleb didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed on the sky, watching a heron drift low over the lake. I used to think I was just background, he said. Even when people said they loved me, it felt like I was only there to serve a purpose. Smile for company. Say thank you when told. Act grateful. Be the easy kid, the quiet one. You weren't background to me, she said softly. You weren't to me either, he whispered. They stood like that for a long time, shoulder to shoulder. 2 people not tied by blood, but something deeper. Choice. And that's when the first envelope arrived. It was postmarked from the city, with no return address. But she recognized the handwriting immediately. Lena. Inside was a letter filled with long paragraphs of performative grief and half-hearted apologies. I never meant to hurt you. I was just scared. We all make mistakes. You'll always be my mother. The last line read, Please let me explain in person. Eleanor read it at the kitchen table, folded it once, and slid it into the drawer beneath the coffee filters. She didn't bring it up to Caleb until the next day. They're starting to come back, she said, like Robert warned. Caleb nodded. Are you okay? I think so, she said. I didn't feel anything when I read it. Just tired. I've been here before. They reach out when they want something. And when they don't get it, they disappear again. This time I won't fall for it. They might try harder, he said gently. They might use Emma. Eleanor's face shifted slightly at the name. Emma, her youngest granddaughter, the one who used to draw her crayon pictures of rainbows and sign them to Nana, love you forever. She hadn't seen Emma in over a year. If they send her, Eleanor said quietly, it won't be her idea. The second envelope came 2 days later. This time it was from Ben. Shorter, clumsier, handwritten on the back of a credit card envelope. Mom, I messed up. I know that. But I need your help. I'm in real trouble this time. There was a phone number scribbled at the bottom. No love, no I miss you. Just a plea and a deadline. Eleanor didn't call. She didn't even think about it. Caleb walked into the room just as she was shredding the letter over the trash bin. Another one? She nodded. Ben. He's still trying to fix everything with a withdrawal. Caleb smirked faintly. That was a good one. She chuckled. I've been thinking in metaphors lately. Must be contagious. A week later, Sarah, the bookstore owner in town, invited them to a small backyard gathering for her son's birthday. Eleanor almost declined. She didn't know most people there, but Caleb nudged her. It could be nice, he said. A fresh space. No ghosts. So they went, and it was lovely. She found herself sitting in a circle of women by a fire pit, sipping lemonade and laughing about nothing important. No one asked her for money. No one demanded she apologize for a feeling. No one looked at her like a resource. They looked at her like a person. That night, when they got home, Caleb handed her a drawing he'd been working on. It was of the lake house, but in the corner, shaded gently with soft pencil strokes, was a woman in a rocking chair, a blanket over her knees, a book open in her lap. "That's you," he said. "The way I see you." Eleanor ran her fingers over the sketch, feeling tears prick the backs of her eyes. "I want you to have this," he said, "for when it gets hard again, for when they try to make you doubt yourself." She didn't speak. She just leaned in and hugged him, not like a grandmother, not like a parent, not like someone trying to fill a role, just like a person who loved another person with all her heart. Later that night, she sat alone in Robert's chair again, holding the letter he had left for her. Not to cry, just to remember the strength he saw in her before she saw it in herself. And to remind herself this life she was now living, it wasn't a consolation prize. It was the reward. Weeks turned into months. The cottage was nearly finished now, its pale gray exterior blending softly with the surrounding woods. Caleb had chosen the color. He said it reminded him of fog rising off the lake at dawn. Eleanor had picked the curtains herself, yellow and light, like sunlight in fabric form. Every piece of the little house felt like a joint effort, something they built together, not out of blood or obligation, but trust. It had been a long time since she'd felt pride like this, not in others, not in things, but in herself. On a cool Saturday morning, Eleanor stood barefoot on the porch of the main house, sipping her coffee while watching Caleb put the finishing touches on the new mailbox he'd painted for the cottage. His initials were on one side in clean brush strokes, and just below them he'd drawn a tiny pine tree, the same one that stood between the two houses like a quiet guardian. "You've got talent," she said. He grinned without looking up. "You say that every time I pick up a paintbrush. That's because it's true every time." He chuckled. "I like hearing it. I never did before." She tilted her head. "No one ever told you." No one meant it when they did. Eleanor felt a familiar ache in her chest, not for herself, but for the boy who had grown up surrounded by people who only saw what they could take from him. And yet somehow he had still become someone who gave. That afternoon, their neighbor, Margaret, came by. She was a widow in her 70s with an easy laugh and a habit of showing up with baskets of baked goods and unsolicited advice. "Just checking on my favorite odd couple," she said as she stepped onto the porch. "We're more like the healing kind of odd," Eleanor teased, giving her a hug. Margaret handed Caleb a small box wrapped in brown paper. "Graduation present," she said. "I know it's early, but I couldn't wait." Caleb opened it slowly and gasped. Inside was a set of professional-grade sketching pencils and a leather-bound journal. "I saw you looking at them in the art shop last week," Margaret said. "This is too much," he whispered. "Nonsense." "Your family," she said simply, as if it were the most obvious truth in the world. Eleanor felt something shift inside her. A quiet click, like a puzzle piece finally falling into place. Family didn't always arrive through bloodlines. Sometimes it walked in with a warm pie and a knowing smile. That evening, they sat on the porch, just the three of them. The lake mirrored the dusky sky in soft purple hues. Margaret told stories about her late husband and the wild trips they used to take, while Caleb sketched the fading light over the water. At one point, Eleanor looked around and realized this was it. This was the life she thought she'd lost. Only now it was better because it was hers. Chosen. Peaceful. Honest. Later that night, as she was putting away dishes, Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She stared at the screen for a long moment, then answered. Mrs. Parker, a young voice asked. Yes, this is Amanda Bowen. I'm Mr. Bowen's daughter. I took over the practice after he passed. Eleanor's stomach clenched. Is everything all right? Yes, nothing's wrong. I just wanted to let you know that we finalized the last piece of your husband's estate today. The charitable donations your husband requested. Those have now been processed. Oh, Eleanor sat down slowly. The fund was released to 3 local organizations: the Children's Hospital, the Women's Shelter, and the Literacy Program at the Public Library. Eleanor pressed a hand to her heart. In your name, as per his instructions, Amanda added gently. In mine. Yes, he wanted people to remember your generosity. Said you were always the one who gave the most, even when no one saw it. Eleanor couldn't respond for a moment. Her eyes blurred again, but this time it wasn't sadness, it was something else. Validation. Grace. Thank you, she said softly. Of course, Amanda replied. He loved you very much, Mrs. Parker. It's in every line he wrote. When the call ended, she stayed at the table, her palms still resting against her chest. She remembered something Robert had said once, not long before he passed. They had been sitting on the same porch, and she had asked, Do you think we did all right? Raising them. He had smiled sadly. I think we gave them everything they needed. Whether they chose to use it right, that's on them. She hadn't understood the weight of that sentence back then. Now she did. She went to Caleb's room and knocked gently. He opened the door, sketchbook in hand. Everything okay? Better than okay, she said. I just wanted to say thank you. For staying. For seeing me. He stepped forward and hugged her without a word. It wasn't a long hug. It didn't need to be. That night, as she lay in bed, Eleanor pulled open the drawer of her nightstand. Inside was Robert's letter, folded with care. She didn't need to read it this time. She just held it to her chest, smiled at the ceiling, and whispered, I'm okay now, love. You can rest. And she did too. Summer arrived like a soft exhale. The days grew longer, and the sun lingered above the lake well into the evening, casting golden ribbons over the water that looked like they could carry memories if you stared long enough. Eleanor had taken to sitting on the porch just after dinner, listening to the wind move through the trees. It was quiet here, in the kind of way that made you think deeper, breathe slower, forgive yourself. One evening in late June, Caleb walked into the kitchen with a letter in hand. Another one, he said, holding it up. Eleanor didn't even look at the envelope. Whose handwriting? Michael's. She nodded calmly. Trash bin. Back corner. Caleb smiled, tossed it away, and grabbed an apple from the counter. He wrote, Dear Mother, like we're in a Jane Austen novel. She laughed. He always did think formality covered up selfishness. These letters had come in waves. First from Lena, then Tom, then Ben. Now Michael. They always followed the same rhythm. Regret, justification, subtle manipulation, and a request for another chance. She didn't need to read them anymore. Robert had already taught her everything she needed to know about those kinds of apologies, how they were designed not to heal, but to disarm. Her children had underestimated her for most of her life, but grief had sharpened her, not shattered her. Caleb came and sat at the table, chewing thoughtfully. Do you ever think about answering one of them? Eleanor considered that carefully. I think about what I would say, but I never write it down. What would you say? He asked. She took a sip of tea, then set it down. I'd tell them that I loved them once, deeply, and that love doesn't just disappear, but it changes. It grows tired when it's mistreated, and eventually it gets quiet, not out of bitterness, just exhaustion. Caleb nodded slowly. That's honest. That's all I have left to be. That weekend, they hosted a small gathering to celebrate Caleb's acceptance into art school. Margaret brought lemon cake. Sarah from the bookstore brought a bottle of wine, and a notebook tied with string. Tom from the hardware store showed up with a set of custom paintbrushes, grumbling that he wasn't good at mushy stuff, but figured the kid could use them. The porch was full of laughter and clinking glasses and the sounds of a real life. Not polished, not perfect, but true. Eleanor watched it all from her rocking chair, a soft smile on her face. These weren't the people she had raised. They were the people who had chosen her, and whom she had chosen in return. At one point during the evening, Margaret leaned over and whispered, "You look happier than I've ever seen you." Eleanor squeezed her hand. "I think I am." Later, after the guests had gone and the stars came out one by one, Caleb joined her on the porch. "You know what I was thinking today?" he asked. "What's that?" "This feels like a second life, like we both got dropped into a chapter we didn't see coming." She smiled. "Maybe we're just finally in the right one." He looked down at his hands. "Sometimes I still wonder if I deserve all this. The cottage, school, you." She turned toward him, serious now. "Caleb, you don't have to earn love. That's what they taught you, and it was wrong. You are loved because of who you are, not what you give, or what you say, or how much you try." He swallowed hard. "I just don't want to mess it up." "You won't," she said. "You already chose the hardest thing, honesty. The rest is just living." They sat in silence after that, letting the hum of crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl fill the spaces where pain used to live. The next morning, Caleb found her in the garden, kneeling near the rose bushes. "Are you planting something new?" he asked. She glanced back at him, dirt on her knees and a trowel in hand. "I thought this spot needed color." He sat beside her, knees to chest. "It's perfect." She looked up at the cottage. "You know, I think Robert would have loved what you've done with it." Caleb smiled. "I hope so." I kept his chair in the design. That little reading nook by the window, that was his, right? She nodded. That's where he'd fall asleep, pretending to read the newspaper. They both laughed softly. "Sometimes I think he's still here," Caleb said. "He is," Eleanor replied without hesitation. "In the quiet, in the way the light hits the kitchen floor, in your sketchbook, in all the ways he taught me how to fight kindly." She sat back, brushing her hands on her apron. "He gave me the tools to protect myself. But you reminded me how to use them." Caleb leaned against her shoulder. Neither said another word. They didn't need to, because they had already said the things that mattered most. In the ways they showed up, in the trust they rebuilt, in the love that didn't ask to be earned, but stayed when things got hard. It wasn't the family Eleanor had started with. It was the family that had stayed. Autumn came quietly. The leaves around the lake house turned shades of amber and deep red, like the trees were finally letting go of what they'd been holding onto all year. Eleanor found herself outside more often, sweeping the porch, planting mums, watching Caleb as he packed up sketchbooks and supplies for his first week at art school. One afternoon, just before he left, Caleb came to her with something wrapped in brown paper. "I've been working on this for a while," he said. Inside was a framed pencil drawing. Eleanor, standing at the porch of the cottage, the wind brushing her hair back, a soft, tired smile on her face. Behind her stood the lake, and next to her, a single chair with an open book resting on its seat. "It's titled Peace," Caleb said quietly. Eleanor touched the edge of the frame, blinking fast. "It's beautiful." "It's true," he said. That night, after Caleb left for school, the house felt quiet again. But it wasn't empty. Not anymore. She made a cup of tea, walked out to the porch, and sat down with Robert's letter one last time. She didn't need to read it now. She just wanted to hold it like a memory, like a promise fulfilled. And as she looked out at the lake, she thought not about what she'd lost, but about what she'd reclaimed. Her voice, her worth, her peace. She realized something then, something she wished she'd known earlier in life, but was grateful to know now. Being kind doesn't mean being weak. Loving people doesn't mean letting them hurt you. And family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shows up, stays, and protects your heart when it matters. She had spent years shrinking herself to fit the needs of people who only saw her as a stepping stone. But now she stood tall, not bitter, just better. And as the wind moved softly through the trees, Eleanor smiled. She wasn't alone. She was finally home.